Thanks, Karen. Hopefully I can work this correctly. I have about 82 slides to go through, so hopefully everybody's awake. Just kidding, Karen gave the axe to about half of them, so this will be short and sweet. My name's Jeff, just plain old Jeff. If you call me Jeffrey, it sounds like I'm in trouble. And I'm usually, or at least in this room, since John Leosatos is here, I'm the second funniest guy in the room. Ha 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 ha, wake up everybody. All right, so this is a quick guide to, see, I knew I couldn't work this thing. What's going on? There we go. All right. See, I'm in trouble. So my life is alphabet or acronym soup. CDOT has like a 10-page, and I'm not even exaggerating, guide to acronyms that we use. So please ask for clarification. But just really quickly on the left, these are CDOT managed grant programs. And when I say CDOT managed, they're usually managed at the Region 2 level. Some of them are headquarters program managed. Actually, they all are. What am I saying? At the region level, we have an excellent local agency team headed by Lachelle Davis, my colleague here. Her team really exists to hold your hand through the entire process to make sure that you stay in compliance with all applicable regulations. You dot the I's and cross the T's, so to speak. But I'll quickly go through the first three on the left. The bottom two, MMOF and CRP. Just really quickly, MMOF, this region is programmed out in those funds till about fiscal year 29, and current legislation that's proposed for the long bill that still has not been passed. They have till May 13th, but current legislation, House Bill 1399, has proposed to eliminate the annual general fund transfer of $10.5 million to MMOF for the next 3 fiscal years. So that's roughly half of statewide MMOF funding. So yours truly will be a wet blanket in the near future to come back to all our awarded projects. Actually, funding that should not affect any awarded projects, but it'll certainly affect future already programmed projects. So don't expect a call for projects for MMOF anytime soon. And then carbon reduction, similarly, this MPO is programmed out, so I want to say fiscal year 29, and so I won't be talking about that today. These links are active, so you can click. I did check them. They do work. And then Karen will cover the SS4A, Safe Streets and Roads for All. That's a federally managed program here during her turn. So firstly, all right, it worked. Safe routes to school. Who here has a school in your community, right? The goals of this program are to make walking and biking to school safe and more appealing, and more importantly, increase the number of kids doing that. My kid's school does not have a school bus route going to it. It's a shame. So Driveline is the devil. I can't wait for my oldest to start driving to turn that over to him. Eligible applicants to SRTS, political subdivisions of the state. There's an actual definition of this. Everybody in the room should be familiar with that. So cities, towns, special districts, obviously school districts are applicable. And then very importantly, locations of these SRTS projects within 2-mile radius of kindergarten through 12th grade. The most recent call for projects legislation was changed to allow for high schools to be eligible for this funding as well for the first time in the program's history. It is a 20% local match. These are federal funds, so keep that in mind. Your project will be federalized with the applicable requirements. As that says, the funding amounts for the next call for projects are yet to be determined, but most recently, the last 2-year grant cycle, that's a statewide total, $7.7 million. That's not just this region, that is the entire state. And then these are applicable, as you can see on the right, to infrastructure and non-infrastructure grants. Infrastructure grants, pretty self-explanatory. I won't read every single bullet point. Traffic calming, in case you guys don't know what that means, that's as it implies, to slow people down in school zones especially, but usually infrastructure projects within the roadway that are designed to calm the drivers down. And then the non-infrastructure grants are pretty neat. They're everything, like it says, from bike rodeos for the kids. My kids loved those whenever they were little kids. I almost said when they were kids. Crossing guard programs, things like the walking school bus programs you may have seen in some communities, so on and so forth. And then on the left, you have the minimum and maximum grant awards for each of those different types. You can see that the non-infrastructure projects are a much lower threshold just because those are usually planning and kind of conceptual projects versus the infrastructure, which obviously costs more. And then as that says in italics, applications for fiscal years 27 and 28. open this fall. I can't give you a better timeline yet because that statewide program manager has not released that. Next program, TAP, Transportation Alternatives Program. This is also federal funding, so this is also a 20% local match, and your project will be federalized. Remember that. The goals of this are to provide active transportation improvements. Active transportation is anything not behind the wheel of a car, so everything from walking to bicycling to skateboarding, let's say, like my kids. Environmental mitigation, so there are some unique stormwater components of projects that are eligible, or historic preservation. I can't speak to that, sorry. Eligible applicants are essentially political subdivisions of the state as listed up there. If you have a nonprofit in your community who's interested in this, they must partner with a governmental sponsor, so town, city, county, special districts, so on and so forth. And then MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, actually get their own direct allocations of funding. And so MPOs like PPACG do run their own call for projects within the boundaries. But that being said, members of those MPOs, jurisdictions within the MPOs also can apply to the region, the CDOT region administered TAP funding. So you can double dip, so to speak, for the TAP funding. The funding amounts, as that says, the funding is to be determined. You'll notice a common theme in my presenting, to be determined. But that does vary by CDOT regions. And when I say CDOT regions, the state of Colorado is split into 5 different engineering regions. We are region 2. 2 is best. We're basically the bottom right corner of the state if you were looking at a map, from Park County over to Kansas and all the way down to Huerfano, Los Animas counties in New Mexico. TAP, the split up is 34.5% directly to MPOs. 58% of that state allocation goes statewide to the 5 engineering regions. There is a formula which allocates that to the engineering regions, and that's based on 45% vehicle miles traveled within your region on the state highway system, 40% of the lane miles, and then 15% of the truck vehicle miles traveled. Pretty interesting stuff. And then 7.5% of that balance actually goes to state parks and wildlife for their recreation trails grant program. So if anybody has a state park or state lands in your unit, maybe talk to your CPW representative. This next call will be for state fiscal years 27 through 29, as it says in italics. And that also will open this fall. This next month in May, we region planners across the state should have a call with our TAP program manager at headquarters up in Denver just to outline that specific timeline. The best I can tell you right now is expect an October, November, December application window for projects. And yours truly here will be running that in Region 2. I'm like the pre-award dude who then, once the awards are made and determined, turn it over to Lachelle's team, who are the post-award people. And I will happily work with you all to develop your application for the most success that we can, hopefully, fingers crossed, for your entity. And then eligible projects on the right, you can see just a couple of highlights. I have the slide clicker on. I almost said next slide, please. Next slide, please. HSIP. Told you I'm full of acronyms. Highway Safety Improvement Program. This is for both on-system and off-system. How many people have a road in your community? Yeah. How many of you have a state or U.S. highway that acts as your main street, right? Most of Colorado do. It's actually very rare, Green Mountain Falls, to not have that kind of thing going on in your town. The goals of this program to achieve significant reduction in roadway fatalities and serious injuries. This is a heavily data-driven program. And so this is also very important, just hint, to work with your local PDs and sheriff's departments to make sure that they do report crash data, because the analysis and the allocations are only as good as the data, right? And so amazingly enough, not all crashes are reported, whether that's the people involved or who knows what. The police are really busy, other stuff's going on. And so very important to get those reported just so our traffic engineers can analyze that data, and then these allocations can be made based on that. Eligible applicants, similar scenario, local agencies and political subdivisions of the state that own or maintain public roads. So again, raise your hand if your town has roads. This is an interesting 10% local match to these 90% federal funds. So it's a little bit more palatable, I guess, for your local community. The last funding round, this is an annual call for projects for a couple years out, fiscal year awards. So this most recent round was actually application period closed February 20th. So sorry, you missed it. as of this presentation. That was for state fiscal year 2029. You can see here that 21 million bucks was divided across the entire state, so not much in the scheme of things. Region 2's allocation based on that crash data ended up being $3.5 million. Region 2 is also 14 counties, so do the math. That peanut butter gets spread pretty thinly across the 14 counties and numerous towns of Region 2. And then furthermore, you can see that a quarter of the allocations to the CDOT engineering regions are set aside specifically for projects that improve safety for VRUs, another acronym. Those are vulnerable road users. I always mess up that. Vulnerable road user definition, that's non-motorists, so pedestrians, bicyclists, or other cyclists, and persons on personal conveyances. So again, my kids on their skateboards. This also, it's very, as with all funding, we do appreciate obligating that money sooner rather than later, spending it sooner rather than later. This is written into the guidance from this program manager that add dates for construction for this particular fiscal year 29 program must be no later than June of 2029. So within that same fiscal year, we are really going to push you to spend that money to obligate that funding to actual construction, not just the design work within that same award year. And then you can see applications for fiscal year 30 funding open December of this year. So please do reach out to myself, to Lachelle. We'll have our region traffic engineer is linked on the second slide in here. That's actually who you turn them into to ask any questions. And then also I want to say that there are examples of successful applications from years past for each of these. And I think that is it. Here's contact information. It's just email addresses. I totally forgot to grab extra business cards, so I probably have like 6 to hand out, but more than happy to hand them out with my phone number as well. Please do give me a ring. If I'm not the right person, then I'll happily get you in contact with who that is. And I'm about to get the big hook from Karen, so let me get out of here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I kind of expected some of these to run a little bit longer. It's great information, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to capture it. Online also, though, in addition to CDOT Region 2, we have CDOT headquarters, and I asked them to talk about how to coordinate with CDOT when it comes to when you go for grant projects. You know, sometimes people say, well, I want a letter of recommendation from CDOT, or not recommendation, but a letter of support, or how do I coordinate with CDOT and some of the grants? Just for example, Safe Streets for All is not eligible for CDOT, but you can partner with them, but the local agency has to apply. So with that, we have Leslie Welch and Jamie Grimm. I don't know who is going to present on that. They are remote.
Hello, everybody. I can present really quick. I apologize. I got busy yesterday and forgot to send them. Oh, no, here they go. And forgot to send them. So, next slide, please. Sorry, I also didn't introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jamie Grimm. I am the federal liaison for CDOT, which means that I work really closely with our federal partners in the congressional offices. So Senate staff, House staff, they come to me with questions about projects or about legislation that might be being introduced. We reach out to them if we have concerns about rulemaking or policy that's going into effect. We're getting ready to we're waiting on a draft of the Surface Transportation Reauthorization, which is what's going to replace IIJA, because IIJA, as we've talked about, expires. So I've been in, close coordination with them, talking about what we're hoping to see in the legislation, the same amount of money if we get real lucky, but I don't think we will. One of the things that I personally partner really closely with these offices on are the earmarks. So once a year, earmarks historically are a pot of money that legislators have given to themselves to disperse in their communities on projects that they have an interest in. So 50 years ago, maybe not that long ago, the early 2000s, we all heard about this thing in Alaska, the Bridge to Nowhere, which was, I don't even remember. I looked it up. It was like $50 million bridge that was going to connect the mainland of Alaska to an island that had like 30 people living on it, but it had an airport. And it was an incredibly expensive bridge project for very few people. And so there was a big outcry about how earmarks basically were a form of elected officials being able to push money towards their personal priorities. So earmarks actually ended up going away in 2010. Congress decided to remove them and to stop using them as a tool. Historically, they'd been used kind of as horse trading, but they had gone to a lot of kind of maybe things that were important to a certain community, but maybe didn't have a lot of national impact. So they came back in about 2021 as rebranded and with a lot more rules. And so in the Senate, they're called Congressionally Directed Spending, or CDS, and in the House, they're called Community Project Funding, or CPF. It's a much smaller amount of money. It is managed very differently than it was in the early aughts and before that. And one of the things is it needs more DOT coordination. So when a community, I apologize. I had a baby a couple months ago, and my husband set him down in my office, and so he's letting me know that I'm not paying attention to him. So I'm sorry about that. What this band of money does, if you apply for a transportation project, the money will flow through CDOT, which means it needs to go on our STIP. Because it is federally funded, it has certain administration requirements. So what you need to do, I'm so sorry. What you need to do if you're going to apply for a highway transportation project or a transit project is you need to come to us and we will write you a letter. It is not a letter of support. We received over 50 requests for CDS letters this year, so we just don't have the bandwidth to be able to do letters of support. What we do is we provide a letter that tells the committee that we will administer the funding according to federal law. We'll add it to our STIP and we'll make sure that all of the administrative requirements are met. So this isn't something that you need to know about right now. Just keep it in the back of your head. And so when the CDS process starts again, theoretically next spring, keep my email address and reach out to me and ask for a CDS or CPF letter of acknowledgement, and I can help you out with that. So happy to answer any questions. Maybe we'll let Leslie talk about coordinating with the HQ grants team while I deal with the bugger behind me. So anyway, happy to take questions in just a second.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. My computer's been a little on the fritz in getting this set up. So if no one can hear me, just let me know, please. And if we could go to the next slide, please. Hi, so my name is Leslie. I am one of the two people on grants team. You may have met Anna Dunn previously, but I'm here today to help present on some of our letter support processes from CDOT. In addition to helping write federal grants for CDOT, I also help Anna in terms of coordination on, things when letters of support requests come in the door, for our executive management team, just making sure that things flow smoothly and helping make sure that the right things get in front of the right people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As far as letters of support for grant opportunities, in terms of the most recent major one, that's going to be Safe Streets for All, is which, Karen will be talking about later and Geoff talked about a little bit earlier. Generally speaking, on letters of support requests for CDOT projects, we're willing to provide letters of supports for localities or municipalities, counties, et cetera, for projects when there's two general major criteria filled, but this can vary depending on context. So, but the major nexus, or the major first point, is there being a nexus with CDOT roadways and highways, and similar. Obviously, if we're writing a letter of support for a project, it usually has to involve or impact us in some way. And then the next major kind of bullet point is that, we're all relatively on the same page. It doesn't majorly interfere with our goals or projects or similar. Everyone's been coordinating, everyone's happy and on the same page, et cetera. That tends to be just kind of our threshold, at least as a minimum for most letters of support. There's other criteria or qualifiers too, depending on the letter of support, but that will vary. One thing that the grants team is trying to gently test out this year is just a simple letter of support request form for Safe Streets for All. This is not a requirement to get Safe Streets for All letter of support, we realize we have not fully rolled out this process to folks, but this is just a gentle testing at this point. This is something that we are starting to experiment and just see and make sure that would be easier on localities, municipalities, our internal project teams, and et cetera going forward. But it's essentially a Google form to help, just fill out information, make sure everything's in the same place, et cetera, et cetera. If you would like to use it this year, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, there's not a requirement to do so. And otherwise, that's mostly it. We're just generally trying to make sure that folks are aware of our letter of support request, needs, and that also we're trying to make it a little easier on folks going forward. And so could we get the next slide, please? Yeah. Yep. And this includes the link as far as the Safe Streets for All letter of support request. And this also has Jamie and I's contact information if you'd like to reach out to us anytime. And we're of course happy to take questions right now. So yeah.
And I'm okay if anyone has questions right now.
Yep.
No questions right now, it looks like in the room. And thank you both, Jamie and Leslie. I appreciate it. And I know the challenges of having children and having to work at the same time. It's tough.